Coming to you live from Chicago, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. We engage the brightest minds in local government. I'm Dan Bolin, a local government attorney and partner at the Ansel Glink Law Firm in Chicago. Today is a very special episode because we are live at the Illinois Tax Increment Association Fall 2024 Conference. Let's hear it, everybody. Give me an I.
I.
Give me a T.
T.
Give me an I.
I.
Give me an A.
A.
What's that spelled?
ITIA.
Is it Atia? Is it Itia? Is this T? Is it a soft T? Is it Atisha? Isha? All right. Anyways, today I'm joined by Geoff Dickinson and Nancy Hill. Geoff is a partner with the economic development consulting firm SB Friedman Development Advisors. He supports municipalities, nonprofits, and private developers on economic development issues across the country. And Nancy has been a land use planner for over 25 years and has a wide range of experience working for and with municipalities. She currently serves as the Community Development Director for the Village of South Elgin, Illinois. Geoff and Nancy, welcome to GovLove.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan. Thanks.
Hi, yes. We are also joined today by our live audience at the ITIA Fall Conference. Please think of questions for our guests later on and compliments for me, and we will let you share them later on if we have time. And for the listener, we have an outstanding microphone for our live audience. It's like a Nerf kind of microphone that you kind of we'll throw it at you. I want to read the warning label on the back. It says do not throw at anyone's head. So we'll try not to do that. We'll get to that later. But first, let's get started with our signature lightning round. Please tell me about your career path, and this is an ethics presentation. So maybe we'll start with the very first time you learned right from wrong. Geoff, we'll start with you.
Sure. I was thinking about right from wrong and how I'm doing on that standard. I guess I grew up in the edge of Fort Worth, Texas, and in my backyard we called it a creek. It was really a stormwater drainage ditch, it turns out. And at some point, there was still some of the concrete from the drainage pipes out there. They didn't totally clean up the site, and some friends of mine decided to try to start a fire inside of the concrete pipe. This is Fort Worth, Texas. This is the fall, and we thought if we just put it in a concrete pipe, that would be okay. Turns out the neighbors didn't think that was such a good idea. Open flames in an open ditch full of brown grasses, and so we got called into this guy's house, and then my parents had to explain to me that you shouldn't start fires in public places. So that was my first glimpse of good ethical behavior, I'd say, Dan.
That was
bad.
That was
I could do the good stuff.
The fire was good or bad?
No. That was you're learning now. So it was bad, and I was taught that, and then I stopped doing so many fires.
Oh, got it. I grew up in Chicago, not a dry environment. It's a humid environment. Yeah. So I suppose it's a different impact for you out there. What happened next? What happened after that?
I didn't do any more fires. I just played in the creek. Oh no, career-wise. I guess I found my way into urban planning through my work. I was working for Standard & Poor's, and I was traveling around to big American cities working with financial services companies, and I found out that I thought my work was boring and the cities were interesting. And so I tried to figure out if there was a job in that, and eventually I figured out there was graduate school and I could become an urban planner, and that's what I did.
Oh, great. Where'd you go to school to do that?
I went to grad school at Michigan.
Oh, very, very nice. What was your degree at Michigan? And what
master's in urban planning, economic development concentration, and sort of wanted to go into. It turns out I wanted to do what I do, which I don't know how. That was the first time I figured out what I wanted to do. I was 30-something, but whatever, we got there.
What were some of the cities that you worked with when you were getting interested in working with cities?
My first job was I was an intern in grad school for Washtenaw County, which is the county that Ann Arbor is in, and I got hired by a interesting, cool guy, Ron Mann, the Drain Man, we used to call him, because
Did he have anything to do with that pipe?
Unrelated. Maybe I got a thing for drains, actually, Dan. I would tell the story. But Ron ran the county drain program. In Michigan, you have to drain farm fields, and people have to pay extra taxes to get their fields drained. And it's sort of like reverse tax increment financing. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but that was my internship, and I was doing mapping and financial modeling, and I still kind of sort of do that today. So it was very lucky to find the job with Ron.
Oh, very cool. Well, so Standard & Poor's, did you have any jobs before you got to SB Friedman?
No, this is my first job out of graduate school. I've been working for the
neat.
firm for 20 years, basically.
Oh, holy cow. How'd you
I
get
had a bunch of careers before that. I was a school teacher and other things, but eventually I figured it out.
Wait, whoa, how were you a school teacher, and how did that has to be a deep mind for ethical lessons.
I mean, I don't know about that. I graduated with a degree in history, Dan. So I was looking for work, and then I was hired to teach high school history.
So you just let the students do whatever? There's no ethical principles you instilled in your students, or is that why you got out of the practice?
I had to get out of the game. No. I was honestly trying to keep up. I was like 22, and the kids were smart, and they were 18, and I was just basically trying to stay on top of the information. I didn't have a chance to do a lot of wisdom imparting. It was just, can I learn one day faster than my students?
Oh, that's a secret. Just stay one day ahead.
It was a long year, Dan. I'm not going to lie to you. The first year was quite long.
Well, how'd you get connected with SB Friedman then?
I started doing informational interviews while I was in grad school and telling people what I was interested in. And I knew I wanted to move to Chicago. And they kept saying, oh, that's interesting. You should talk to so-and-so. And pretty much everybody I talked to said I should talk to Steve Friedman, who was the founder of our firm. And I, for whatever reason, I didn't know Steve Friedman, and I didn't realize Steve Friedman would have picked up the phone for anybody. But I thought that would be a weird thing to do. And so I talked to like 30 different people, all of whom said I should talk to Steve. And then I eventually got hired by Steve, despite myself, essentially.
What was your first position there?
I was an associate, which is where most folks start. And an analyst, basically. I did research, I did mapping, drafted memos, sort of the work of our work, basically the core work that we still do. I'm sort of the manager of that work rather than the doer these days more.
What is that work for folks that, I know folks here might know, but folks at home listening?
Sure. Our firm is a consultant to mostly local governments on economic development matters. Different people do different things, but usually we're helping them do something that is weird or hard or rare. And TIF is kind of weird and hard and rare. Most towns don't use it often. They use it for very specific public policy reasons. And it's sort of Byzantine and esoteric, and we have a lot of experience with that. And so we can help towns, sometimes developers, sometimes nonprofits, navigate this sort of complicated tool to make projects that otherwise wouldn't get built.
Sounds easy.
We're learning. Every day we get a little better, Dan. That's all I can say.
Well, that's an excellent career path. We want to hear about Nancy's. Nancy, why don't we hear about yours? When did you first learn right from wrong?
I think professionally, one of the first times I really learned about, just really had this deep feeling about right from wrong is maybe in a public meeting, and I think a lot of people in this room can relate to this. When you're I was in a public meeting, and somebody made a statement, something to the effect of, 2 ducks and a cattail doesn't make a wetland, and kind of thinking back, going, actually it probably does, and that's probably not something we should just pave over, and has some environmental sensitivity, and something that is worth preserving and needs some special attention. So that to me was a time where I felt like the work that I was doing was really important.
Oh, that's a meaningful response. Did you like ducks growing up?
I don't have necessarily an affinity for birds. To tell you the truth, I really kind of don't like them at all.
Anti-bird. That's a known thing.
And for the listener, I don't trust birds either. They descended from dinosaurs. They're really out to get us. And so I appreciate your view on birds, but tell me a little bit more about how you got started in your career path.
I went to college to become an architect. I realized pretty early on I couldn't draw, and that was going to be a big problem. I went to school at Ball State in Indiana, and as part of that program, after the first year, you choose planning, landscape architecture, or architecture. And planning, urban planning was very attractive to me, and I graduated with a degree in urban planning. Went to work right out of school. I was working in Kentucky, actually, right out of college, and had a great mentor my first job, and that's where I heard the 2 ducks in a wetland comment in a public hearing. And while I was working, then kind of realized after about a year or two that if I really wanted to make some really big impacts and make more decisions, I thought I needed to be a department head and or have more influence. I wanted to be more of a department head or in a leadership position, and so I went to school part-time to get a master's degree in public administration. And after that, I feel like my career is kind of a jungle gym, and I've worked in the private sector as well as nonprofit. I worked for in Illinois, we have councils of government, and I worked for a council of government for a little while. So all over the place.
Oh, tell me about some memorable stops on this jungle gym.
I think probably my favorite places to work have been kind of growing communities. I like trying to do. I like the new development kind of work. I know that's not something a lot of people necessarily find challenging, but I like it. So there's always something new every day, and that's where I find myself today, actually, in a growing community.
Did you spend some time in Forest Park, Illinois?
I did. Yeah.
Longtime listeners of this podcast know we talked to some folks from Forest Park in the past, and I guess one thing that they have there is they have more cemeteries. They have more residents underground. Yeah. Than they do above ground. And one of the things that they have are the casket races. It's almost spooky season, so like they're getting ready to do them again. Did you see these? Did you have anything to do with these?
Forest Park is a really unique community, inner ring suburb of Chicago. It is 2 square miles, I think, if I recall, and about 1 square mile of that is cemetery. So not on the tax rolls. So that is kind of interesting. But there's a lot of historic character there, and actually also probably some characters. I mean, which kind of makes the community unique. They can embrace their culture with the cemeteries, and so something they do. I wasn't too involved in the casket races, but I understand that's something they do now, and that's totally embracing this a character of the community.
Jeff, for you, if you were participating in the casket race, how would you decorate your casket?
Boy, I'm immediately picturing the Undertaker meme. That's all I can see when you talk about this. And so I guess I think that's a black casket, if I remember, which isn't too exciting. But racing stripes are good. Flames, something fast. Obviously, if you're going to be in a race, you need to make it look fast.
Yeah, the flames on the side do make it go faster. That's scientific. That's the end of our lightning round. Everyone has a perfect score. Congratulations. So what we're going to try to do today is instead of giving you an ethics lecture, we're going to try to talk about some ethics principles and hear about how you apply them in your day-to-day career. And so in order to do that, I do want to hear a little bit more about your current jobs. Like Nancy, I'm sure folks in this room know, but maybe not everybody does. And maybe your job's a little bit different than everybody else's that does it. But what's a community development director do? I know you talked about how being a department head is a meaningful place to maybe make change.
Yeah, well, I think a community development director varies from organization to organization, but in the community, South Elgin, Illinois, where I currently work, I'm responsible for land use planning, zoning, building building and permits, code enforcement, economic development, and occasionally some housing work, housing development. I oversee a staff of 6 people, and I also serve relative to this group. I also serve as a liaison for South Elgin has a nonprofit economic development corporation that serves the community.
That's neat. So what's a typical day look like for you? Is there one?
I think a lot of people in this room can relate. It changes every day. There's something different. Every day is different.
Yeah, it's never boring. What kind of, some of those past roles that you talked about, like how have they informed the work that you do today as a community development director?
Well, I think having worked in the private sector has made me more respectful, I think, of the role of the developer in and the risks that a developer takes. And I'm also, I think, more aware of the risks development has to the municipality and the risks. I think I'm just better at negotiating development agreements than I was 10 years ago or before I worked on the private side. I think I'm just much more aware of the risks to municipalities when negotiating a development agreement.
Yeah, you're able to understand their perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very interesting. Jeff, how about you? Like, what's your typical day look like in your role as an economic development advisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to Nancy's. One of the joys of consulting is I get to work on different problems in different places. And so, I've got clients that are small towns in Illinois. I've got clients in Idaho that are medium-sized cities. And so it is varied. And I mean, it's just, it's interesting to me to get to understand what's important to other communities and try to help them achieve that. My personal goals, dreams, aspirations, I live in Chicago, for this city are fine, but that's, when I go to another town, I'm there as a facilitator, and so I need to listen and learn and then figure out how best to help them go where they want to go. And that is so every day I'm taking in new information about most of the community. I mean, I don't know everything there is to know about the technical stuff, but I know a decent amount, and I'm always learning there too, which is part of the joy of the work. But learning about new places and new people and how to help them get where they want to go is what I think is the most rewarding part of being a consultant. And I appreciate the dedication that folks like Nancy have to working the same town, consistently and really getting deeply involved. And so I like that. I never get to the depth that somebody like Nancy does with the community, but working in the same town for many years, I start to approach that, and I value that a lot too. So I like the variety, but I like a little continuity as well.
The Joy of Consulting, that's going to be the title of your book, correct?
Boy, oh boy. Did I say that out loud? That sounds a little crazy, but I do really enjoy it. Yeah.
We'll check the tape. I'll make sure. But I guess kind of the way that, Nancy has been around a bunch of different places in her career. Tell me about something that you learned from having these clients all over has like informed your work in another place, or kind of some lessons learned that you were able to apply in another project.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that with experience, what is good in one place is bad in another, and I think that is, I guess I can't think of a specific one off the top of my head, and hopefully I will, but a lot of places where we work in Illinois are on tax increment financing. There's a concern about just specifically school kids coming out of a project. And for the longest time, that was what I understood the dynamic to be with school districts. And then I had some experience where it was a shrinking small town, and the town really, really wanted more people to live there and more kids in the schools. And so that, kind of like Nancy was saying, working in the private sector flips your brain a little bit, and you see the other side of the coin, and you start to realize that it's very situational. What is the right thing to do, and what is important, and what is worthy of public money? I mean, if I get down to like the TIF mentality of sort of what we talk about here is, each town has to decide what they want, and then they have to decide if they want it enough to give it public money. And so recognizing that every town has their own goals and objectives, and then that they are, I guess, that help that those are not unique to their town, but they are specific to the town, and they might be the opposite of the town next door. That happens every day, basically. I think that the road goes one way, and it turns out every road is kind of a two-way street, except for the really bad ones.
Nancy, you're as an experience in one of the communities you worked in the past, informed anything you're working on today?
Oh, absolutely. You can kind of see some patterns that often happen, and I think I'm better able to predict some things that may occur or try to prevent some things that may occur, and that just sometimes only comes with experience. Experiencing some bad things, or maybe just having egg on your face sometimes and wanting just to prevent that from occurring again. I don't want to go too deep about the
No, but lessons learned, for sure. I mean,
are so
when you
important.
sometimes you screw up,
Yeah.
and you
just
for sure
learn
learn
from
that
it.
lesson.
Yeah.
That's
You'll learn from
absolutely.
it.
Learn from mistakes, grow as a professional. That's for sure. Well, we are at the Tax Increment Association conference. We do have to talk about tax increment financing, and a lot of people in this room will be familiar with it, and so, but maybe our listeners might not. But maybe an interesting way to, for our audience here, the live audience, is to hear how you explain what TIF is to a regular person. What's your favorite way to explain what TIF is to an ordinary person that might not know? Nancy, what do you think?
The easiest way, I think, for somebody that's not involved in it every day is to, I try to explain it as that it is a financial tool to help attract private development to economically underperforming areas. And it's a way to incent or offset redevelopment costs by making, in a challenged area, by having, trying to encourage redevelopment by making it equal to green grass costs through trying to offset those extraordinary costs that may be in place because you are in a area that's already been developed and has some challenges associated with it.
Oh, neat. Are there some examples of projects that you point people to as like what TIF can do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's hundreds of projects, or thousands of projects across the state. But in a lot of communities, you can look at, when you have a kind of a big hulk of a building that's been sitting vacant, projects that wouldn't have happened because of TIF. Maybe there's been infrastructure projects or communities that have bought land with TIF funds. There's just such a long list of different opportunities for TIF projects.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the tool. It's reasonably flexible in terms of it's a power any town can use in Illinois, and so the context, as I said before, are very specific. So some places are trying to create a downtown that if they don't have a robust downtown, or they're trying to drive housing downtown to support downtown businesses. There's sometimes more of an economic development play. We're trying to build a business park because we care more about jobs. We're trying to rehab historic buildings. We're trying to clean up environmental sites. So it's a utility tool to help solve the thorny problems. And so that's, as I say, that's the beauty of it. It's really just a source of money. I think the other thing that's interesting about Illinois TIF law is it does allow you to pay for private costs, which in other states it can really only be used for public expenditures, and so it's even more flexible here than in other places. And so it's nice to be able to, sometimes the problem isn't the infrastructure, it's something else, as Nancy was saying, and so it can address those challenges too here.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Well, I think in Illinois, I mean, one of the largest benefits of it is that it can generate a pretty large sum of money over a long period of time, and it can be a catalyst for redevelopment outside of the TIF district, which is a main goal in a lot of communities.
Oh, that's neat. So, well said. Jeff, maybe take us through the life of of a project, maybe from the first request for assistance to receiving funding, maybe.
Sure. I think sometimes the process starts way before you call the consultants, I guess. So usually there's, I presume, I guess I'm not part of these conversations. Nancy probably can speak to it better than I can. You don't call the consultants and the lawyers until you've got a project you've got some interest in, usually. And so there's a we've been involved in towns where we've helped them work on a comprehensive plan. That's, part of the goals of that plan would be a downtown revitalization strategy. And then, then the community starts to walk from a planning ambition, defining their goals, who do we want to be when we grow up, and then bringing the TIF tool to the table, and then the developer comes to the table to start to execute. As Nancy said, the interplay between the private sector and private investment and public policy goals that's a large part of why I find this work so interesting. But once the developer shows up, hopefully they're proposing a project that is going to check some of those policy goals. What does the board want? What does the community want? There's no obligation to provide financial assistance to a project if it's just a project. You just say, great, good luck to you. It's zoned, you're allowed to do it, go crazy. Once the municipality thinks about pulling their checkbook out or their TIF tool out, you've got to have this some nexus with public ambitions and public policy goals. But the process, unfortunately, unfortunately, that's the nature of everything. It's a negotiation. And so I've been involved in TIF projects that felt like it was 60 days from the first meeting to an approved agreement, but that's quite rare. It often takes quite a long time. So the developer has a project, they ask for money, there's some back and forth about how much the money is, eligible costs, do they need it, how do we structure the assistance, lawyers and consultants and board members and staff all sort of wrestling to get a project that works for all parties. And that can take months, that can take years sometimes, but it's a good, I think that multi-person process, you try to hammer out the issues that are important and get a shape that works for everybody, essentially.
I think one of the negatives to TIF in Illinois is that there can be objections, and it is a long and complicated adoption process, as people in this room know. It can be painful. And so the communities that do it, I think, really well have built really good relationships with the other taxing bodies that, and you start to have those conversations early with the taxing bodies. So when you are ready to have those discussions and have a joint review board in Illinois to adopt a TIF district, it's not a surprise to those taxing bodies. They see it coming. They've communicated what the goals are to in particular the school district, which is often the largest objector, most significant objector, and there isn't any controversy in that regard. So that's the one thing that's also happening behind the scenes. There's the discussions with the developer, but there's also these discussions with those taxing bodies too.
Ooh, building relationships, communication, maybe teasing some of the conversation
Page 3 of the outline
for later about ethics rules. But before we move on to those, Jeff, we are, speaking of building relationships, at the Illinois Tax Increment Association Fall Conference. Can you tell us about the association? Understanding you're on the board, tell us about the group and what some of its current goals are.
Sure. It's an organization that has been in place, I should know for how long, quite a long time. And I think one of the main goals of the organization is education. So we have 2 conferences a year where we share best practices and sort of learn about the tool, learn about experience. Obviously, there's always changing creative uses of the tool and changing case law and things like that. So folks, I think, are members to stay apprised of the best and brightest. We've got an ad potentially coming in here. So that's part of the reason I think the ITIA is involved. I think it's been historically a great organization for people to share and learn and grow. I've been coming to this conference practically since I started, and for many years I didn't have much to say because I was still learning a lot, and increasingly I won't shut up. So it's a good place for that. I think we're growing as an organization. I think we've tried to capture people, as I said, public sector, private sector, Illinois is a big state, and try to get representation from all sorts of communities, urban, rural, suburban. And I think we're going to keep trying to grow in that vein to make sure that we can all learn from each other, and we can all, I think, support communities in their goals. I think that's what everybody here is for, is to try to help communities do the hard things.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason y'all asked us to be here today, the kind of growing the reach of the organization. The Engaging Local Government Leaders Network is kind of a big tent local government organization in all different kinds of disciplines. And so that when the organization reached out to us to do this, it was a natural fit, and it's very exciting to hear what the organization's doing. And for the listener, the conference here is beautiful. I want to commend the conference planners that we're looking out over Grant Park in Chicago. It's a very, very beautiful space. Thank you all for having us. And I guess that kind of brings us to the meat of our conversation. There are a few different sources of ethics rules that apply to local government professionals. We're going to try to talk about these different ethics rules and hear about how you apply them in your day-to-day career. I think one is the ICMA Code of Ethics. It has a series of tenets for local government managers and administrators. I did not see the movie Tenet. I assume this is what it was about. Tenet 3, for example, is to be dedicated to the highest ideals of honor and integrity in all public and personal relationships, in order that the member may merit the respect and confidence of the elected officials or other officials and employees and of the public. They have some guidelines that talk about what public confidence means. Members should conduct themselves so as to maintain public confidence in their profession, their local government, and their performance of public trust, and talk about the impression of influence. Members should conduct their official and personal affairs in such a manner as to give the clear impression that they cannot be improperly influenced in the performance of their official duties. And Nancy, around the management team in your village, maybe talk to us a little bit about how you apply some of these principles in your day-to-day work.
Yeah, I am a member of ICMA. As such, I need to follow the ICMA Code of Ethics. And so I spend a lot of time myself thinking about it, but talking with my staff about it as well. And so when I'm working on a project, I do find myself kind of double checking myself and asking, thinking about decisions and asking myself, how would I think about a project, or how would I think about this if my, what would my peers do? What would I think if this appeared in the newspaper a certain way? What would people think about this? How would I feel if how would the public feel if this decision went one way or another, or my decision went one way or another? I think in this day and age, what would happen? How would I feel if this video, if there was a video went out on YouTube that had, it was splashed on the newspaper or headline, or splashed on YouTube? I mean, all those things I think about pretty regularly, and I talk to my staff about it as well.
Ooh, I got an idea. Like instead of TikTok, it's like Tiff Talk. Like that could be a way to connect about these issues. Jeff, do you have any thoughts about any of those first principles we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, what Nancy said really resonates with me. I think me and my colleagues and my peers try to ask those same questions of ourselves. We're in the same way that the municipal staff has to say things with confidence that they believe in, and you have to feel comfortable with that, both sort of factually and ethically. And we pressure test stuff usually in the office that says, hey, this is what we're thinking about. Am I thinking about it right? Fundamentally, I think that's the goal, is to be thinking about hard questions right, and then figuring out how to communicate externally with our clients, with the public, whoever that may be. But it's not, I guess it is, as Nancy said, it's an everyday discussion of what, it's not always life and death decisions, but it's important. I think the spirit of this comment is sort of perception of a public trust and things like that. We even though we're not working for the public directly, we feel we're a part of that. And if we have to be able to feel comfortable and confident that our choices and our recommendations are ethical and appropriate and reasonable. And so we try to challenge each other and be open to those kind of conversations.
Yeah, and I think this conversations is a big part of it, and I think this tenet 9 is to keep the community informed on local government affairs, encourage communications between the citizens and all local government officers, emphasize the friendly and courteous service to the public, and seek to improve the quality and image of public service. Jeff, how do you work with clients to keep the community informed about economic development projects with, especially with some of these topics could be like a little dense? How do you communicate to regular people?
Yeah, I mean, it is, our job is, sometimes it's complicated technical work, but a lot of the time it's then doing the work of converting that to communications. And, sort of, I was laughing about being a school teacher for 3 years, but that it's sometimes sort of the job is like, folks who get elected, some folks have a lot of experience, elected boards with economic development matters, and a lot of folks don't. And so we have to figure out how to, and then there's the general public who more frequently has less experience. So, the challenge, one of the challenges of our work, and probably Nancy's, I guess I won't speak for her, is how do you get the right amount of information across? Sometimes, and how do you do that? But I think I treat it as our obligation to make complicated things simple and clear so that people can ask questions. I think make the information penetrable, I guess, is a phrase I sometimes use with my staff, my colleagues, of, we can't make this a wall of technical jargon, technical math, but I want people to be able to ask, see enough, understand enough to ask a good question and to let us illuminate where their concerns might be. So we take that, and that's in collaboration with our clients usually. The municipality and the staff knows their board better than we do, and so we have to help tune our messaging, particularly to the elected officials and the appointed officials when we're speaking to them, with the help of the municipal staff. But the general public, isn't so different place to place, and so we, if that's more the audience, we maybe can be, more on a level playing field with staff. But it's a big part of the job, honestly, to get the communications right, because it is.
Yeah, the communications are such key, and I think it's becoming more and more challenging to have those good communications for a variety of reasons. I mean, you used to be able to call the newspaper and sit down with a local press person and have a communication with them and feel like it could be reported accurately. Now, in the community that I work currently in South Elgin, we don't even have a local press person regularly attending meetings. There isn't that relationship, even though I think we've tried. I think something further, our communities are becoming more diverse in race and ethnicity, so there can be some language barriers, and you try to address those and cast a wide net. But also something that I think we found too is that you depend on technology to be able to help you be able to provide information in lots of different languages. But as our population ages, that technology is not the best way to communicate with an older population. So it becomes that much more challenging when you have a community of limited resources. And we're just finding we have an aging population. I think all of us, if you look at census data, we're finding that we're going to be having that. South Elgin's working with the AARP to try to become a more age-friendly community. Our local library is a dementia-friendly community, so luckily we have an organization that is really helping us and training us to prepare more materials that are age-friendly. But I didn't know the first thing about putting materials out that somebody with dementia could read and and understand, and they're an important part of the community.
Well, that's very interesting. I was at a public meeting recently, and they had a media member show up, first time, long time, and they were just there to find out what the trick-or-treat times are. And so yeah, it's hard to get your message out, to your point. Jeff, you mentioned a bunch of different clients doing it a bunch of different ways. Can you think of an example of when a client did communications about economic development well?
I think a lot of them do it, and Nancy, I think, brought up the most important point, which is you got to do it when the heat's not on, I guess.
Right.
To build those relationships and be transparent. I think some of the ethical and sort of principles that we, if you're consistently communicating, sometimes it's not very interesting because not much is happening, but we're not, we're sharing, we're getting it out there. And I think most communities that we work with, they see, municipalities see the other, Illinois has a large number of taxing bodies, for those of you on the podcast, like a very large number.
We got
and so
the
there's
most,
a lot
baby.
of coordination required. Yeah. And so, but I think they do a good job of working together, because every one of those entities, the park district, the school district, the library district, the municipality, in the broadest strokes, they have the same goals, which is success and happiness for the residents and businesses. And so I think most towns are pretty active in that arena. But when they get into a new space, they haven't done a big economic development project, and so their communications have been maybe less complicated, less confusing, less threatening. Then there's often just direct meetings. I think that's a very effective way out of the light of just talk to people, go have lunch. Usually, often it's board members are involved, sometimes staff are involved. And again, Nancy has been to these meetings. I haven't been to really hardly any of them, but I think it's building trust, which I think is another part of, we're all here together and nobody's out to get anybody. We all serve the same people often. It's literally the same voters. And how do we do that? But I think the technology and the increasing concern to make sure that smaller groups of people are getting communicated with, I think has been a really positive trend in the last decade. We've had similar experiences with work in helping to get partners help us translate and communicate in other languages. Visually impaired, we had a deliverable that had to be remanipulated and posted on a website in a way. We got advice on colors and things like that we just didn't know about. And so we want to be inclusive, and we're all trying to make sure everybody's as well informed as they can. And it's interesting to learn, I guess, from a selfish point of view, about how to better reach people that aren't me. You know what I mean?
Right, meeting people where they are. Very, very nice. And it kind of goes into our next source of ethical guidelines, the AICP Code of Ethics, the American Institute of Certified Planners. This code explains that there are 3 primary principles we should all aspire to: responsibility to the public, to clients and employers, and to the profession. Nancy, what does it mean to you to be responsible to each of these groups?
Well, I think Jeff said it really well. It takes a personal commitment to really dedicate the time to analyze whether or not all parties are being treated fairly and equitably, and if your behavior is consistent with the values outlined in the ethical guidelines, fairness, honesty, and integrity. It's a personal commitment, and it does take effort.
Oh, well said. Jeff, how do you, in an advisory role, kind of promote these kinds of ethical principles with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, the AICP, talks a lot about those, complications. We are a private business, we're a for-profit business, but we're also a mission-driven firm. And one of the reasons that I was drawn to the whole field was I wanted accountability to more than just myself and my bottom line. And so it's I think the kind of people who are drawn to become planners are inclined in these ways. You want to, you want to do the right thing. You want to do things to help people. And so it's often the conversations come up in the facet of communication. How do we message? How do we explain what is going on with this complicated tool, this complicated project? And in doing so, we think about what is this going to do for the greater public in the town? What is it? what is it going to do for our direct client, which is, the Board of Trustees often. And then to the profession as a whole, we're just, I think planners in general are trying to, we believe, I think, maybe not all of us, but we are generally rational, positivist people. We think if good information gets out in the world, good decisions will get made. And that we're not blind to power, but I think we generally believe that good information leads to better decisions. And so I feel we can pursue these goals consistently. I think when, in the ethics sessions that I've attended in the past, working for the private sector is a slightly different take. You know what I mean? Those are, when we work for them, they're a profit-seeking business. But the beauty of asking for public money is their project has to serve the public. It's not just how can we raise prices on Skittles or whatever. Like they're interfacing with the public, they're interfacing with elected boards, and so there's a structural pressure to make projects that are good in multiple facets rather than just purely profitable. And that's part of the reason I like this rather than being just a regular real estate person, I guess, is that triangulation means I'm working on projects that I feel good about.
As a Skittles consumer, I prefer to keep the prices low. There is some candy on the table for everyone in the room.
Skittles, though, that's the problem.
While I'm talking to everybody in the room, this is Nancy's favorite question on the outline, and maybe I'll put it to you, and we'll hear from you what your thoughts are on it in about 10 minutes or so. Nancy, what is the most common instance of a less than ethical practice that you see performed innocently? I'm sure everybody wants to be a good person. They think that they're not doing anything wrong. What's maybe an example that you might have seen in your work?
I think sometimes very innocently, it's easy to get excited about a project, and so sometimes confidentiality maybe gets by a little bit because, and I think it's very innocent, but I think it's because people get excited about the project and maybe say a little too much. And again, I do think it's very innocent, but it's really excited. It's exciting. The nature of some projects that just have maybe weighed heavily on a community, and you see some potential for change and some really positive investment in a community can be just, sometimes these are election issues, and there's just immense pressure to perform well and perform in a quick timeline, that when you have something that's going your way and, something kind of gets by you, and we're human, we make mistakes, and you just maybe slip and say something you shouldn't have said, and it kind of can come back to bite you, but it's meant to be innocent enough, and you're just excited.
Yeah, which is why you come to the TIF conference and remind yourself of these ethical principles to reinforce those times when folks might get excited about this stuff.
And it might be just a very little slip,
right.
This project is coming. Oh, we're getting this store, or and this store is part of the project, and I wasn't supposed to say that,
right.
And then it gets repeated, and then it gets repeated again.
Right.
So, yeah.
Can I ask Nancy a question, Dan?
Yeah, please.
I guess I'm not involved in nearly as many conversations as you are. I guess sometimes the conversations around a local developer are slightly different than an out-of-town developer, and I don't think it's unethical per se, but I feel like that's something that I'm sort of aware of. But I don't know if it leads to different treatment, or I don't know. It just seems like an area where there can be it can be prickly. I think towns eventually, the process is run as it should be, and everyone is treated fairly. But some of the, I don't know what the table talk is we used to say in the olden times of playing cards, maybe a little different.
I don't know. I don't know how many small developers there are,
in the world anymore.
in the world anymore.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the type of developer.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder, I think, to be some of the small guys today,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think my experience more recently has been more kind of national developers, but so maybe somebody in this room probably has some better experience with some smaller developers. But I do think that, maybe when it comes to like a local business, a local, that maybe is where, confidentiality is really key, because, for example, maybe it's a major business and they're looking to expand, or they might have to leave, and the employees don't know it yet. And so that confidentiality is going to be really key, because that employer is talking to the municipality, and it's meant to be very, very quiet. So,
Interesting.
yeah, those scenarios are really difficult.
Yeah.
Well, before we throw to the audience for their questions or maybe their thoughts on this question, I do want to share a quick case study that we brought, and maybe you could just tell me the wildest red flag that you hear when I go through it. This is based on a real case. We've changed the names to protect the innocent, maybe, but maybe. Actually, at the end, you'll hear
That's
that
right.
they were.
Oh, yeah.
In Ohio, a county auditor was accused of having an unlawful interest in a public contract under an Ohio statute. In this case, the auditor, we'll call him Alan Auditor, lobbied for approval of a TIF proposal designed to provide funding for infrastructure that would permit the development of property he or his family members owned. Allen proposed that the refund of unspent tax money to a local school district should be used to build a golf academy for the students at a local country club. Allen was a member of the country club and resided nearby, and everyone in town knew his daughter was on the high school golf team. In a private meeting with the school district treasurer, Allen proposed taking $250,000 each year over the course of 3 years to build the facility. In a second private meeting, Allen proposed this idea to the school district chief operations officer. Allen did not disclose his conflict in either meeting. The school district requested a legal opinion, which ultimately rejected the proposal and described numerous legal and practical issues that would arise. At this point, Allen's proposal was denied, and no further action was taken. On a review, the appellate court held that Allen only attempted but did not continue to pursue the project, so Allen did not violate the Ohio Code and reversed the trial court's guilty verdicts entered by the lower court. Guys, what are any red flags that you noticed there?
Where to begin?
Right. So I think one way to frame it, and I think Jeff said it best when I first told him about this case, is that everything that is legal may not be ethical. Those are two different things, and maybe Jeff, you could expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I guess I intended to do some crimes, but I didn't do them, and therefore I didn't do any crimes, I guess is what happened here. And
Right.
that is probably not against the law, but it sure smells bad. Like, so it's wild when we were talking earlier about optics and communications and what will the community think and all those things about what is this appropriate? Like, when your daughter's in the golf team, when you're giving money to a private club, it seems wild that someone thought this could work, I guess, frankly. Like, it just seems like it was, and obviously there wasn't much of an ethical concern for Mr. Auditor, but it's I guess it's a people will try things. I guess that's the takeaway from this, and try to do unethical things, and as long as they don't do them, it's not a crime, I guess,
Yeah,
which is concerning.
everything that's legal isn't a good idea.
It's true.
I remind clients of that all the time. I'm reminded at home all the time. I'm legally married. Was that a good idea? That depends
on who you ask,
the day. Nancy, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, where to begin? I mean, I'm not familiar with Ohio disclosure laws, but, you know, it sounds like he resided on the property, he had some influence, he maybe had some financial gain from the project. He tried to influence it, didn't disclose that that he was a member of the country club, that his daughter was on the golf team, building a facility for a school on private property. Red flags everywhere.
Right. And I think that was an interesting part of the case. In the opinion, they talked about the testimony about how when the school district officials were talking to this auditor, and they were afraid of, this is another official. We don't want to be respectful of this idea but we all know it's probably a little crazy that he's asking this. It's just being mindful of those kind of power dynamics. And I think the best part of the case, and selfishly because I'm a lawyer, was that that they did contact the school district, contacted their attorney, got an opinion, and kind of shut this problematic project down. So I think that was an interesting part of the case.
It sounds like the school district saw some of these red flags and thought, well, this is odd.
Yes.
We need to ask some more questions here. And I get it. Sometimes it's hard when you have an elected official in the room that's not your elected, that represents your body. You feel like you're challenging them and saying, why are you even here?
No.
Why are we even talking about this?
Asking questions, a good thing to do. I'm going to invite the audience to ask us some questions. I really want to throw this Nerf mic at somebody. For the listener, it's a big orange cube, and it feels like it's soft. There is a heavy magnet in the bottom of it, so I could see why they say not to throw it at anybody's head. Do any questions, stories that folks want to share, or responses to what we talked about today? Oh man, this is a brave person. All right, hold on 1 second. Here we go. Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna take it from you.
Oh, you should go, Jeff. That's more
I guess
responsible.
Jeff's firm and our firm are in somewhat the same position, but I'm curious about, for example, we have lots of municipal clients that have been clients for years, some with ongoing continuing services agreements, and yet we have worked for some developers. And so I know how we deal with the developer who comes to us, wants to get TIF assistance or some other kind of financial assistance for a project in a community that is either currently our client or is regularly our client. Because I think there's some ethics issues there, and it's like, how do you handle it?
Sure. We try to stay on one side or the other, John, and I think you guys probably do the same thing. So there are some towns, suburbs here, where we're not on the municipal side and we will represent developers. There are, and vice versa, mostly we're on the municipal side and we don't work for developers in towns where we work for the city. There have been some exceptions. The one I can think of immediately, we were asked by a village that we work for to work for a developer to help them shape a request and move a project along. We had two different partners lead those exercises, so there was a separation internally. So the person who was representing the village wasn't representing the developer, but that was at the municipality's request, and so they were comfortable with that approach. But generally, we just don't. But your question, I think, goes to, we don't work for everybody all the time, and so when are we no longer working for a village, and that one's trickier. We haven't worked for them for a couple of years. Is it okay to work for a developer? We have to kind of discuss that internally, discuss that with the village or the town, and try to figure out what's the right thing to do.
it's much the similar situation, but as you are right, sometimes it's because the municipality wants the project. And so now you got to figure out jointly with them and with the developer how you're going to fit into this role, and with the permission of both parties, and preferably in writing. In terms of our practice, when that situation occurs, it's immediate notification to either party of, okay, look, we represent this municipality, and even if we don't represent them at the moment, it's like, yeah, but they've been a regular client, so they're going to have to sign off.
Yep.
Or vice versa. I mean, yeah, you're right. Try to stay out of it, but it's not always possible.
Yep.
Well said. Maybe got time for one more question. Please gently share this microphone for whoever wants to.
There are too many things up there that can be hit.
That's the one thing they warned us about is like, yeah, it says not to throw it at somebody's head, but there's lots of drinks on the table so that you could really. Yes, ma'am, your question.
Well, so my first comment is more something that served me so far in my career is just the very simple phrase of perception is reality. And so legally, if it is, it's okay, it checks out, but is this right? How is this going to smell to the public? So that's just simply that I share with the boards that I've been on. Sometimes they take the advice and sometimes they don't. But anyways, and then the next question, or the question that comes out of that is, I find, we work in the government world, whether you're in the private sector or not, but, and I feel like we're really good at taking 20 sentences to say, and maybe in what one sentence we should say is, this is unethical, we can't do this. And so is there anything to be said for, I don't know if that's maybe career-wise, maybe not the best move, but I'm just finding also, maybe it's the code enforcement background too, where, people want you to, move they don't want to do the confrontation themselves. Everybody wants another person to communicate the issues. And so do you see any value in, if we kind of, rather than always trying to be so maybe politically correct, is just being a little more frank, still polite, still respectful, still not sacrifice or jeopardize your career, but instead of, again, taking 20 sentences where maybe the message gets lost, be a little bit more forceful. And I'm going to take 2 sentences to say, perception of this is unethical and this is not the right move for us.
Well said. Jeff, Nancy, I want to give you a chance to respond to it. We are running out of time, so I want you to give me your thoughts on that. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I want you to say, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as the exit music for this episode? Jeff, you'll go first.
Lakeshore Drive, given our location. The song Lakeshore Drive by, I think it's Aliota, Haynes, and Jeremiah. For the older folks in the crowd, they'll know it.
Oh, very, very, very nice, very nice. Nancy, your thoughts?
You know what? I just wanted to say I appreciate those comments. Those were great. I totally agree, and I think some of that comes with some wisdom and experience to be able to just have the confidence to be able to say things and just feel very confident about where you are, and just being able to say, yep, no, we're not going to do this. And I would just say I'm a Gen Xer, and my song would be We Built This City Starship.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. We'll give you opportunity to sing it. Go ahead.
I don't sing.
Karaoke's later tonight.
Got it.
Tim.
All right. Fair enough. That ends our episode for today. Thanks to everyone for joining me at the ITIA Fall Conference. GovLove is produced by a rotating cast of ELGL volunteers. ELGL is the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. You can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on LinkedIn at GovLove Podcast. Thanks for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government. Bye.
Care who goes to that kind of place. Knee deep in the hoopla, sinking in your fight.